are in listen-only mode.
Morning and welcome to the 5 series and this morning's presentation from me, Chris Jones. I'm a partner in the Restructuring and Business Growth group in gunnercooke, and what I'm going to be looking at today are 5 ways to structure your business for the year ahead. And within that, I'm going to be looking at the 5 key things I think any business needs to have, particularly so that they don't end up coming to see me too much once they get in distress. The Restructuring and Business Growth team advises companies, directors, insolvency practitioners, financiers in respect of businesses that are facing challenging times. We take the view that businesses should be saved where possible, and even better, and more importantly, never get into the position where they need too much of their services. So this 5 series really follows that theme. The 5 things I'm going to look at are business leaders. How good are they? Do they have the necessary skill sets to run the business and to achieve its objectives? Is the leadership structured properly? People, looking at the wider number of people in the business and the issues that come around those. The commercial terms that the business uses to undertake what it does. Money. Finance. Is the business properly capitalized? Does it rely on certain finance facilities to operate? And fifthly, money again. Cash is king. How good is the business at ensuring it maximizes its cash recovery for the goods or services that it supplies? So, first off, let's look at the leaders of the business. What I want to talk about here is good leadership. We know that it plays a major role in achieving success in the business venture. All that your business venture is today and all that it will be tomorrow is a result of the leadership in directing the course the business will take. As has been said, a business short on capital can borrow money, and one with poor location can move, but a business short on leadership has little chance of survival. So when we look at business leaders, we're looking at their capabilities and abilities and also the structure within which they operate, so corporate governance. Is the business leadership structured properly? Does your business have proper corporate governance in place so each director knows his or her role in decision making and discharges his or her duties to the company in line with the Companies Act? Spot my deliberate mistake there, sorry, the slide says 2005, it should be 2006 due to my typo. Companies Act 2006. The duties are worth referring to again, so directors need to know that they act within their powers. Very importantly, there's an obligation to promote the success of the business. They must exercise independent judgment. They've got to exercise reasonable skill, care and diligence in what they do. They need to avoid conflicts of interest, not take third-party benefits, and declare interest in transactions. All of these are fundamental as to how the business operates, and directors need to know about them and act accordingly. Again, how is the decision-making process managed in the business or the organisation? Are there set procedures? Are regular board meetings held, for instance? How are those minuted? How are they arranged? Who attends? Is everything done in line with the corporate constitution? That is to say, the company's articles of association. Do the directors even know what articles of association or the corporate constitution are? Do they work within it? And even more importantly, when looking at the leaders of the business, do they have the necessary skill sets to run the business and achieve its objectives? Directors come into businesses from a variety of directions. Some are promoted within because they're particularly good at a particular thing. Others have a particular skill set and join the business, for instance, finance. Others are there from the get-go because they have an idea, they're entrepreneurs, and they set up the business and run with it. Is everybody properly trained? Are they competent? Do they have the ability to lead the business in line with its strategy, to execute in their particular area? Think about updating training, thinking about developing skills. There's some very good resources out there, some of which, for instance, are fully funded, so the business doesn't pay a penny. I know the Growth Hub Executive Development Programme is up and running in Greater Manchester, available to businesses located or trading in one of the 10 Greater Manchester boroughs, as long as it's an SME with under 50 million turnover. Moving on, let's have a look at people. We know that people are very important to a business and how it operates. However, again, to stop the business facing too many difficult challenges and to ensure that issues when they arise can be properly dealt with, certain things have to be put in place and exist. So, policies, procedures, competence. Does the business have decent human resource employment policies in place? Are those up to date? When were they last reviewed? Employment law is a very fast-moving area. Do they cover all of the issues of the day? Are those policies and procedures robust enough that they don't leave the business exposed to issues as and when they arise? Something going wrong with employees, either individually or en masse, can be not only a big distraction but financially harmful to a business. Is there going to be trouble if something does go wrong? In the same way we talked about business leaders being fit for purpose, as it were, are the employees themselves fit for purpose? Do they fit in with a business strategy? Do they know what the business strategy is or the part they play in it? Are they properly trained and engaged in what they do for the business? And again, think about ongoing training, etc., to deal with that. Going back to procedures and competence, do the employees have proper contracts in place? Is the business protected in the case of departure, especially of senior executives, senior managers, where confidential information might get misused? They might go to a competitor. Is the contract drawn in such a way as to deal with the kind of issues that arise in that case? The next area I want to look at are commercial terms. Too often in companies that are in trouble or financial distress, I come across scenarios where the commercial terms within which the company operates are just not fit for purpose or are very good but have been misused, misunderstood, or not applied in the correct way. It's worth undertaking a review of these or keeping them under constant review. So what we're talking about here is, what contractual relationships does the business have with its suppliers and customers? How are those recorded? Is it a matter of practice? Are there proper contracts in place? Is it standard terms, regular invoicing, etc., etc.? Do these relationships leave the business weak or exposed, or are they such a way that actually they're strong and support the business? Again, look at those and look at the contractual terms in place. Does the business have proper procedures for putting contracts in place and ensuring they protect the business? Who undertakes negotiations of key contracts with key suppliers and key customers? How is it left? Is it dealt with by somebody at a low level who simply uses a fairly formulaic procedure, or is it dealt with at a higher level, reflecting the importance of a key customer to the business? If the business is using standard terms, whose standard terms are they? If they're yours, well, then hopefully they protect the business because they've been drawn up in such a way to do that. If they're someone else's, then have they been checked over, and does the business understand the impact of using those on the business in that particular relationship? If the business is working on the basis of an understood position, is the understood position reflected in the commercial financial impact of that particular customer or supplier to the business? Very importantly, and especially in terms of the work I do, one has to look at the knock-on effect of failure. Does the business have key suppliers? Does it have an important product that it sells into the market where it has a supplier who provides something fundamentally important to that product? What happens if that supplier fails? Do you have all your eggs in one basket, or is there a contingency plan to deal with that failure? Is there sufficient stock, for instance, constantly held of the product that's needed? Or can the supplies be replaced quickly? How long would it take to onboard a new supplier in that case, especially where regulatory issues might be involved, or the timing of doing that, auditing a supplier, the cost, etc., etc. How about key customers? How much of the business's turnover is dependent upon any particular customer? What happens if a particular customer fails and the loss of revenue, bad debt recovery? What is the then consequential financial impact upon the business? Going back to the contracts between the business and the customers for supply of goods, for instance, there might be things such as retention of title clauses incorporated. That's very good. Do they work? Have they been properly observed? Again, is there a contingency plan when taking customers on and considering whether it's appropriate, or is it simply a case of saying, well, it's a really good relationship, they pay us a lot of money, and we'll just sail with it and see where we go? Always sense check and always make sure that things operate in favour of the business and that the business is robust enough to deal with those issues. I've put amongst the 5 issues, 2 of them on money, but it's 2 different types of money. Firstly, I want to talk about finance. Is the business properly capitalised? How often is that checked in terms of the structure of the business? Does it have enough money to run its day-to-day needs? Does the business need new investment? If it does, how is that going to be introduced, and what issues are going to arise around that? I've recently advised people looking to raise new finance or put new finance into businesses in circumstances where a very deep dive view needed to be taken of the existing facilities and how they worked. If you're looking for new investment, how are you going to go about getting that? For what purpose? And how will it work? Maybe the business already relies on particular finance facilities to operate. If so, are those facilities fit for purpose? And what impact do they have on the operations of the business? That is to say, as a quid pro quo of the provision of the finance, how is the business restricted in what it can do? Is the business bound up in having to report certain things financially to the facility provider? Is it a good relationship? Actually, as people come and go on boards of businesses, do the directors actually know what the facilities in place are for finance? Do they understand how they work, what might constitute a breach of facility? So, for instance, it's common in a lot of banking facilities, of course, to require regular repayments to a loan. However, hidden in the depths of the black type facility agreements are a lot of other things, which, if they're not observed, can constitute a breach of covenant. So, again, financial reporting, dealing with matters like that. How free are the business's assets where the business does have finance? In other words, how the facilities are secured. Are all of the business's assets tied up with that security because there's debenture security and the like? Or in fact, does the business not really own any of its operational assets? It's quite common nowadays for large manufacturing entities to have a lot of the machinery on finance. What type of finance is it? Some people will be under the misguided view that actually it's a case of paying off that finance and the plant or equipment will vest in the business once that's paid. Actually, again, when you peel the layers and look at the agreements, the company's never going to get title to that because it's a lease agreement. In other words, all it's done is have the machine for a short-term period, as long as it pays the money. What happens when that lease agreement comes to an end? What happens to the machinery? Will the company still need it, or is the company fine in renewing it and starting off a new lease for another new piece of kit? How fundamentally important is that machinery and its maintenance to the business? Do the directors know the term length and renewal terms of finance facilities? And have they got a plan on how to deal with those and how to go about renewing or replacing them in due course? Again, does that fit in with the business's strategy and its need for finance and investment? What if it doesn't? Then again, it's a case of sitting down with the bank manager or whoever it is to clarify and check these things through, or accountants. And lastly, still talking money, but coming at it from a different angle. What I want to look at here is the day-to-day receivable position of the company. Again, in what I do, a lot of the issues that arise are not necessarily because the company is doing things badly or is failing in what it does, but because it simply doesn't get paid. In other words, other people are bad at paying it or can't pay it. Cash is king after all in a business. So what we need to consider here as the last of our 5 series points is how good is the business at ensuring it maximises its cash recovery? How is that dealt with within the business? Is it left to some clerk in the back room of a dusty office to pore over old ledgers and send out standard form letters in the hope that at some point somebody will pay the bills? Or is there a slick system in place for ensuring that money is owed and paid on time, and that the company maximises its recoveries, and within that also it maintains good customer relationships? Does the business have a system for ensuring that the customers it supplies will pay? In other words, it's great to get new business, it's great to get new customers. Salespeople are rewarded in some businesses very well on the basis of that. However, at that point, again, similar to the commercial terms of a contract, what is done about payment and how payment is going to be undertaken? What checks are made to test the robustness of the customer and their ability to pay, especially for the volume of business that might be coming through? How is that monitored? How are invoices raised to ensure that the cost of things is always covered? Within that onboarding process, who decides who to supply and how? Very often new customer relationships are only sales-led. Credit controllers may say they don't have enough of a say or involvement in those. It has to be a combination of the two, because at the end of the day, credit control starts at client inception, not when the customer is failing to pay its bills. Look at the interrelationship of the money with the commercial terms of the contract and how the contracts are structured. Make sure the key points are dealt with. Make sure that issues are covered. For instance, if you're a manufacturing business and you have to buy a lot of things in for a specific contract, have you got something in place to ensure that you can pay for those, and that maybe, if necessary, the customer is bearing a share of the cost as things go on? These are the sorts of things to put out. Does the business have in place a procedure for dealing with and resolving customer complaints or issues that delay payment? If it doesn't, then it needs to get one. That's a procedure that needs to cover a number of bases. It needs to keep the customer happy, but it also needs to make sure the company gets paid. How quickly a company can resolve issues of non-payment and gets paid is really important, because chasing payment becomes a very costly and expensive business, especially if you come to some people who do that, who are looking for a percentage of the recovery, or certainly just in the cost of business in terms of the delay in payment and the ongoing impact it has across the business. These are the sorts of things that need to be considered and looked at. So, within that, I've covered 5 topics within the 5 series as to what I think are important in terms of thinking about structuring your business for the year ahead. What I'm going to do now is sit back and see if we have any questions. And if we do, please can you type those in if you're online, and I'll then read them out. I won't necessarily say who they're from, and we'll then reply to them as well online during this presentation. So please fire away if there are any. Okay, so no questions, that's great. Thank you very much for attending today. That's the end of the webinar. We will do a follow-up circulation to everybody with the slides, and if you have any ongoing queries or issues, then please do not hesitate to contact us. Thank you very much.